Hi there, everyone. This week's coffee chat is all about numeracy. So Linnell's going to take the lead on this, and I'm going to be learning about numeracy and can't or won't, just like you. Thanks, Linnell.
Okay, so I'm going to share a story about a young girl I used to work with and we'll call her Tina, not really her name, but she wouldn't do the work. It was in a first year of formal schooling. So in New South Wales, it was a kindy school. And she would just shrug her shoulders when it was maths time. And she just wouldn't get started. The teacher would always have to either go around and step by step get her to do anything. Everything was a real burden to achieve anything. So it really appeared that she just didn't like maths, wasn't going to do it. So we had to find out.
So you had to think about whether she couldn't do the math, whether she was can't learn, or whether she was choosing not to learn, whether she was won't in that won't basket. So how do you think you might go about doing that for Tina?
Well, what we did do is find out what she could do without needing one-to-one assistance. Well, that was the goal we set ourselves, is to help Tina to have a go without needing one-to-one assistance after every instruction. So we found out what she could understand. So I was the learning support person to help her. So I was able to do some extra assessment with her. And I discovered that it was a language barrier. I also, between the teacher and I, we spoke to her parents and found out that she hadn't spoken English very much at home before she came to school. But interestingly enough, she hadn't spoken her own language very well and didn't follow directions very well at home in her first language. Once we found out that she had problems with her first language as well, we had to have a little more exploration done on that down the track. But that didn't stop us from getting started with helping her to become familiar with the maths language and to help her to follow some directions. So with that, Gail, that actually was a problem in literacy as well as in numeracy, as you could imagine.
So that was through oral questioning of her and then having a discussion and asking some questions of the parents. And that really together, those two pieces of evidence, they helped you and the teacher understand that it was basically a language problem, but it was more impacting on maths, numeracy. Yes?
Well, I guess that's because that's what I was focusing on. It was impacting everywhere, but because for the purposes of what was I going to do about it from a numeracy point of view, that's where we had to get started on following the numeracy maths language. And one other little interesting point was, as she was an only child, her mum could identify her needs without a lot of language being necessary. So she wasn't actually used to having to use her language or to be understood clearly. So these are all the interesting things and necessary things sometimes you have to discover. And then, of course, we could work with mum around helping her, Tina, to need to use her language to ask questions and identify her needs.
So it was a big difference between the one-on-one at home with mum and the whole class situation where she was one student in a kindergarten class. So I'll be interested to see how you got her to be a little bit more independent both at home and at school, because they were interacting as well, weren't they?
Well, it was. And it was conversations of let's make some little goals of what do we want Tina to understand. And from a maths language point of view, we started with some of the number sense language. We had to help Tina understand what before and what after meant, what more and what less meant. These are words that the maths teacher uses every day. If you look at the curriculum and syllabus documents in every early maths class, the teachers just says them a lot. You know, let's count forwards, and what number comes next? Let's count backwards. What number comes next? And when I was watching the class, I realised that Tina didn't understand any of those basic words. So we were able to give Tina some extra support. We had another small group of students who had some similar language problems to Tina. So we could all get together and do small intensive sessions where we played some games, and I would ask the questions and I would expect the students, including Tina, to respond with some language. And it was actually just a short amount of intensive time daily for 15 to 20 minutes for a few weeks, and we started to see some results where some of this basic number sense, basic maths language became something she understood. Of course, exactly the same words were words the teacher would use and make sure she clarified with Tina, and that we would get Tina's mum to use and make sure she clarified with Tina as well. So that there was this multiple settings where Tina was expected to do the same thing.
And in each setting, you ended up having evidence of her learning. Did you? Is that what happened?
Absolutely. We kept track of that. Checklisting is a really good, easy way to track that. And we would monitor that, yes, she was understanding and using the language. We had not only understanding, but using was important goals for Tina.
Yep. So where to next for Tina? Did you find that her work samples showed some improvement in her ability to complete the numeracy activities in the classroom?
Yes. So for the ones where that specifically related to what we'd been working on, we were able to expect that she would have a go at getting started on those. So the teacher might just do an extra clear prompt at the whole class level before she sent the students back to do independent work. And then we could see that Tina would have a go at that. And so instead of needing someone to come over and talk her through every step of the way, she was able to go back to her seat and have some success. Of course, that was still within the parameters of what we had worked on. We couldn't expect that necessarily to spill out over other skills of maths or even into the literacy subjects where she would be independent, because maybe the language was still impacting in those areas.
Agreed. So it was your explicit teaching and consistency in that language that really made a difference for Tina. And that difference was in her numeracy, correct? Yeah?
That's right. And we didn't expect that it would spill out over into everything until we introduced that quite explicitly as well. And then we did, over time, a speech pathologist was involved in as a team approach, because Tina didn't just have English as a second language. There was actually a diagnosed language disability over time. So we stayed in touch with that team member, and she also became an important part of let's explicitly teach Tina and practice a few more. We added other skills of both receptive understanding and expressive reception. So there's some speech pathology terms if you're familiar with working with speech pathologists, but that's a really good way to work together as a team to help a student to achieve some goals, so that we can move from can't, or what actually, as I said, in Tina's case, it appeared like she wouldn't do the work. Well, it was actually because she couldn't understand the directions or understand the language involved in the work.
And that's important for us to all think about it, but sometimes it seems like won't, and Tina might not have been behaving very challengingly in the classroom, just not completing the work. And in the end, it turned out that it was a can't rather than a won't, even though we thought it was won't to start with. So that's something that we can all take away. And we'd love to hear your stories about struggling students and how they might be similar or different to the story about Tina. on Thursday evening when we have some feedback. So maybe you have a student from a non-English speaking background or not, or maybe you have a student who is just not completing his or her work. We look forward to seeing you on Thursday evening, and Lynelle will be there to answer all your numeracy questions around this. Thanks, Lynelle.
Thanks, everyone. See you soon.